On a stormy afternoon, Jake Evans, a man who had always felt like a quiet observer of the world, found himself in a situation that would change his life forever. The rain was relentless, drumming heavily on his car as he navigated the winding back roads, trying to avoid the chaos of the main streets. That's when he saw her, a drenched German shepherd, struggling to stay above the rising floodwater near a storm drain. Her eyes locked with his, and in that moment, something deep inside Jake stirred. Without thinking, he pulled over, his heart racing not just from the urgency of the storm, but from the desperate plea he saw in the dog's eyes. He had no idea that this act of compassion would set him on a path of self-discovery, testing his courage and his heart in ways he never expected. But rescuing the dog was only the beginning. Little did Jake know she wasn't alone. She had led him to a secret, hidden in the very depths of the storm. As he reached into the drain to pull out a trembling, cold puppy, Jake's life and the lives of these dogs would never be the same. This is the story of how a simple detour on a rainy day led Jake into a world of cruelty, kindness, and ultimately, the unbreakable bond of love. Welcome to Acts of Kindness Stories. Jake Evans had always been the type of person who preferred to keep to himself. A self-employed consultant with a small tech firm, he had learned to navigate the stormy, unpredictable world of business while quietly managing his own life in a small, one-bedroom apartment on the outskirts of Westlake. He loved the freedom that came with being his own boss but hated the constant stress that came with it. Life had a way of pulling him in 1,000 different directions, and his dreams of volunteering abroad or writing a memoir about his parents' journey of immigration always felt like they were put on hold. On this particular afternoon, the storm clouds had gathered ominously above, and as Jake drove home through the winding backroads of Westlake, he could feel the tension of the day weighing on his shoulders. The heavy rain slapped against his car windows, the rhythmic sound adding to his already strained thoughts. He had expected to get home quickly, but the storm had worsened, and the roads had turned into a slippery mess. Navigating around traffic jams seemed like the best option, so he steered his truck onto a less traveled path, hoping for a smoother ride. But then, through the rain-smeared windows, something caught his eye. A soaking wet German shepherd struggling to stay above the rising waters near a clogged storm drain. She was trembling violently, and her eyes were wide, desperate, pleading for help. Jake's heart skipped a beat. There was no question about it. He had to stop. Pulling over to the side of the road, his hands shook slightly as he grabbed the coil of rope from the back seat. The weight of the situation hit him immediately. The world outside was drenched, and the downpour seemed to have created a flood that made even the simplest task dangerous. People had drowned in swift floods before. He had heard the stories, but the fear he felt for his own safety was nothing compared to the pitiful sight of the dog trapped in the storm drain. So vulnerable, so alone. Jake didn't hesitate. He threw on his old boots and rushed into the water. It was freezing cold, and it felt like the current might sweep him away with every step he took. But the dog needed him. The dog's whimpering cut through the roar of the rain and the gusts of wind. He waded through the knee-high water, his clothes sticking to his body as he carefully approached the German shepherd. Her eyes locked onto his, and for a moment, it felt as though they both understood each other. He knelt beside her, gently speaking to her in soothing tones. "It's okay, girl. I've got you." The dog, battered and weak, seemed to trust him instantly. Her movements were slow and painful, but she managed to crawl towards him, only to be stopped by a piece of broken fence that was lodged against her hind legs. Jake didn't think twice. He knelt down, his hands shaking with urgency as he worked to free her from the debris, pulling twigs and branches away from the storm drain opening. After what felt like an eternity, the fence piece gave way. She was free. Jake helped her to the safety of his truck, supporting her as best as he could with the rope he had found. The journey back was precarious. Every step was a battle against the rushing water, but somehow they made it. He opened the passenger door of his truck and helped her inside, the dog collapsing onto the seat in relief. Jake's heart swelled with a mixture of relief and concern. The rain kept falling, but she was safe for now. Despite being soaked to the bone, Jake felt a sense of warmth fill his chest. The dog, who he could now see was intelligent and deeply grateful, seemed to have more on her mind than just getting out of the storm. She kept glancing anxiously at the darkness outside. Her ears perked up as she let out a low whine. Jake, concerned, followed her gaze but saw nothing. It was then that he realized. This dog wasn't just looking for safety for herself. She wanted him to do something more. Okay, Jake muttered to himself, unsure of what exactly she was trying to say but trusting her instincts. It was then that she began to bark, not in panic but in a pointed manner. She scratched at the window with her paw, urging Jake to follow her lead. He didn't know what she sensed, but there was no mistaking the urgency in her movements. Jake decided to trust her. "I'll check it out," he said, though he had no idea what he was getting himself into. With the storm still raging, he stepped out of the truck once more, the dog attempting to follow him. She slipped slightly on the wet pavement, but Jake caught her. "You can't come, girl. Wait for me here." She whined again, but he could see that she understood. Jake carefully made his way back toward the storm drain, the flashlight in his hand cutting through the darkness. He knelt at the edge of the drain and peered into the swirling mess of water and debris, but at first there was nothing. Then faintly he heard a small sound, a whimper. His pulse quickened. There was another dog trapped inside, one even smaller than the German Shepherd. The realization hit Jake like a ton of bricks. The German Shepherd had led him back to save her puppy. She had been trapped herself but knew there was more to be done. Without hesitation, Jake dove into the water, feeling his arms go numb from the cold as he reached into the drain and carefully pulled the small, terrified puppy free. As soon as the puppy was out, the older German Shepherd nuzzled it, licking its fur, her tail wagging with relief and joy. The reunion was heart-wrenching, but Jake knew there was still more to be done. The older dog, now reunited with her puppy, looked at him once more and began limping away down the road. Her gaze was full of determination. She wanted him to follow. Jake had already done so much for her. He had rescued her from the drain. He had saved her puppy. But she wasn't finished yet. She wasn't ready to stop. Against his better judgment, Jake followed her through the flooded streets. His mind raced with confusion and concern. What else could be out here? What was she leading him toward? They trudged through the water together, the dog limping beside him, her gaze always ahead, looking back only to ensure he was still there. The storm was relentless, but there was no turning back now. She led him to the yard of an abandoned house. The building was falling apart, its windows boarded up, the porch sagging beneath the weight of neglect. Jake hesitated. The house felt eerie, abandoned, and yet the dog was insistent, barking twice before limping toward the rotting front door. He tried the door handle. The dog didn't give up, though. She circled around to the side of the house, guiding him toward a broken window. She whined again and Jake's heart sank. Something wasn't right here. He pressed his flashlight through the gap in the window and saw movement. Another dog, an emaciated German Shepherd, trembling with fear, chained to a corner inside. Jake's stomach churned with fury and compassion. How could anyone leave a dog in these conditions, abandoned, starving, and terrified? The chain was still attached to the dog's collar, its legs restricted, its body weak from lack of food and care. This wasn't just neglect. This was cruelty. Without thinking, Jake went to work. He removed the glass shards around the window and used a piece of plywood from the yard to help him climb inside. The smell hit him immediately. Mildew, decay, and filth. It was suffocating. The emaciated dog curled into a corner, trembling, but there was a flicker of recognition in its eyes. It wasn't entirely lost. Jake carefully worked to untangle the chain from the broken furniture. The dog yelped in pain, but once it was free, it stood weakly, its ribs jutting out painfully, but it moved toward Jake, pressing its nose into his hand. It wasn't much, but it was something. Jake led the dog outside where the other two were waiting. The reunion between the dogs was both joyful and heartbreaking. The puppy, the mother, and the emaciated adult dog were together again, alive, free from the horrors of the abandoned house. Jake didn't have all the answers yet. He didn't know what to do next, but he knew one thing for sure. These dogs needed him, and he couldn't turn his back now. He led them back to the truck, all three of them slipping into the seat together as the storm raged on. They were cold, exhausted, and broken, but they were alive, and in Jake's heart that was enough. They had found each other on this stormy night, 3 dogs and a man, and no matter what came next, they would face it together. As the weeks passed, Jake's life became a series of small, simple moments, each one reminding him of the profound change that had taken place. Every morning, he woke up to the sound of wagging tails and the soft patting of paws across the floor. Astra, the resilient mother, her limp nearly gone, would nudge his hand for affection. Axel, the stoic older dog, though still fragile, seemed to hold a quiet dignity in his eyes as he followed Jake's every move. And then there was Rookie, the puppy, always full of energy, bounding around like he was forever chasing joy. Jake had made the decision to foster them. At first, he had struggled with the thought of taking on such a responsibility. His small home, his hectic work schedule, it all seemed like too much. But every time he looked into their eyes, he felt a deep connection. It wasn't just about rescuing them. It was about giving them a life they deserved. A life free from fear, neglect, and pain. The bond they shared grew stronger each day, and Jake began to realize that it was no longer just about giving these dogs a second chance. They had given him one too. His once solitary life was now filled with love, laughter, and the comforting presence of 3 German shepherds who had become his family. And with that realization, he knew he couldn't imagine a future without them. But there were still challenges ahead. One day, while at a local park with his dogs, Jake found himself facing a difficult decision. A couple approached him, admiring the shepherds, and expressed interest in adopting Rookie. Jake froze. He had never expected to be in this position. Rookie, the puppy who had stolen his heart, was so full of life and energy. He deserved a forever home. But letting him go felt like losing a piece of himself. Still, Jake knew it was the right thing to do. It was what he had always hoped for them, to find homes where they could live the life they deserved. It was a bittersweet moment, but it was also a reminder of why he had opened his heart to these dogs in the first place. Love and kindness didn't mean holding on forever. It meant giving them what they needed, even if it was hard. Meanwhile, the investigation into the cruelty these dogs had suffered was still ongoing. The authorities had apprehended Robert Vance, the man responsible for the horrific breeding operation, and with the evidence Jake had gathered, justice was beginning to take shape. But for Jake, the fight wasn't over. He knew that there were other animals out there who needed help, and he wouldn't stop until they were all safe. It wasn't long before Jake had to make a tough decision once more, whether to adopt the dogs permanently or let them go. After much soul-searching and reflection, he realized that he was ready. He had found a new home for them, one that would allow them to thrive, and more importantly, one that would allow him to be there for them every day. They had become part of his life, part of his heart, and there was no turning back now. That day, as Jake settled into his new home with Astra, Axel, and Rookie by his side, he knew that the love they shared was unbreakable. They had been through so much together, but they had survived. They had healed, and so had he. Their journey wasn't just about rescue, it was about redemption. And it was a reminder that no matter how difficult life gets, there is always hope. If you've been inspired by this incredible journey, by the unwavering love and resilience of Astra, Axel, Rookie, and Jake, then we invite you to share their story. Please like this video, share it with your friends and family, and leave a comment to show your support. Let's spread hope and kindness together. And don't forget to subscribe to Acts of Kindness Stories. We're so close to reaching 10,000 subscribers, and we need your help to get there. Your support helps us share more uplifting stories like this one. Thank you for watching, and remember, no act of kindness, no matter how small, is ever wasted. Together we can make the world a little brighter, one rescue at a time.